Hello everyone and welcome back to the Decarbonisation Summit in partnership with SSE. We've decided to give Aid Thomas a break as we move into the fashion and retail panel, nothing personal to Aid. But we would like to set the scene a little bit and give a bit of background into the challenges and impact that fashion has on the climate crisis at hand. We've got some brilliant panelists joining us remotely and in person. But before we move on to those and do some intros, I just want to give you an idea of the impact that fashion has on the world. At the moment, the fashion industry is responsible for immense amounts of waste globally and on our doorsteps now. It's exploitative of water and people and requires a lot of impact and resource. Whilst we have immense waste on our doorsteps, there are people working on the solutions, you'll be glad to know. And hopefully we can move into some of those as we talk across this panel. So Dian-Jen is the co-founder of Post Carbon Lab, responsible for the creation of a pollution filtering garment. They're a collaboration-based social enterprise with a nucleus of regenerative sustainability and dignity. Dounia Wone is the Chief Sustainability and Inclusion Officer at Vestiaire Collective, the leading global app for desirable pre-loved fashion. Geoff Kendal is CEO and co-founder of FutureFit, committed to developing accessible yet cutting-edge systems which will help companies and investors transform their businesses to meet vital sustainability challenges. And Georgia Ray Taylor is a sustainability strategist for EcoAge. They help brands lower their impact on people and planet, communicating their journey in a transparent and tangible way. And finally, Jessie is the founder and CEO of Provenance, a software company enabling businesses that make and sell products be transparent about the people, places, and materials that make up their products. So I guess to start off with, I think it's important to draw attention to how big the problem is and how we're going to start hammering away at it, I suppose. Of course, in recent years, there's been a huge boom in fast fashion, which has added on to that pile of waste and added on to problems that we've encountered previously. So I guess, Georgia Ray, if you wanted to just shed light on how much waste there is and how big the problem is within the fashion space.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thank you for having me on this panel. And yeah, fashion is, like any industry within our system, creating a lot of waste, creating a lot of impact across the entire supply chain. Waste is such an interesting one, especially when you think about it from a consumer's perspective. I know my personal journey with fashion has been really interesting and it kind of highlights the waste issue, so bear with me as I tell this little story. So when I was kind of like 18 and 19, you're trying to find yourself in the world, you're looking at Instagram, you want to look good, you want to get a nice dress and go out to town, and so you go to a shop that is within your budget as a student, it's limited budget, and so you buy a dress and you go out, and then you wear that dress a couple of times, and then you as a person, you change. You're young, we change all the time, and maybe that dress doesn't fit what you want to perceive yourself as, what you want others to see you as. And so then you go and you put it in a charity bin. And you feel good about that because you're putting it in a charity bin and hoping that it goes to someone else. But in fact, we know that a lot of issues are actually caused by people dumping really unwearable and unusable clothing into charity bins, thinking that they're doing the right thing, it ending up being a really big issue for, say, St. Vincent de Paul or Salvation Army. They're having to sort through, and then it's going into charity shops that are filled with clothes. Someone else is maybe buying it, but otherwise it's going into landfill. And so I'm back at it, I want to go out again, I want to see my friends, and so I go out again and I buy another dress that I can afford, probably made of plastic from a fast fashion brand. And then again, the cycle continues. So within the space of 6 months, and I've gone out a couple of times, I may have gone through 6, 7, 10 items of clothing that I'm simply wearing once, twice, and then throwing away. And so that's just me, the individual consumer. I'm better now, I promise. That's not what I'm like anymore. And that's me. And then if you take that to the entire kind of system and everyone doing this, you can see why there's an issue. Right. Because either I'm buying it, I'm putting it into a charity shop, it's then, either going to someone else who then the cycle continues and it ends up in waste or in landfill being burnt, or being dumped into other parts of the world where they're being basically, given this secondhand clothing from economies like the UK and told, like, this is good for you, like, you're a developing country, we're going to give you this. And so they're ending up with the waste. Or in fact, I'm just throwing the clothes straight into the bin from my wardrobe.
Sure.
So it's a massive issue as a consumer, and it's a massive issue for a brand.
So now just coming into your role at EcoAge, tell us a bit about the strategy part of that chain, I guess.
Yeah, so I feel
and your role, sorry.
Yeah. So I've recently joined EcoAge, which has been such a privilege to be part of a company that for 12 years has really been, working to change the industry beyond fashion, but particularly in fashion. And so what we do with our clients is we really try and apply systems thinking. And I think this is probably something we can definitely dig into. I know that all the panelists could probably talk in so many different ways around this idea of systems thinking, which is a new kind of buzzword within sustainability, but it's just one that's vitally important. And so that basically means when we come to our clients, we look at their entire system. We don't just look at one part, say just their carbon emissions or just their waste. We take the entire value chain and then the broader system that they exist within. And we really look at where they're having impact, where are the areas that are like the hotspots, if you want, like the really bad impact areas. And we try and work to create actions, and honestly, Geoff, you could probably talk far more on this around actionable plans, but it's about creating change where it really is needed. But yeah, some clients of ours and some fashion brands, their business model is not set up to be able to go circular, to be able to go regenerative, to be able to go sustainable. And then that's another conversation we have to have.
We'll get onto it, don't we? We've got time to come on to that as well. I think as part of the intros, it'd be good to make our way around the panel that's online now. Probably starting with Jessie, as I know you're very passionate about the transparency side and the work you do. So if you could just shed light on why transparency is such an important part of the sustainability spectrum within fashion, and a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, sure thing. Absolutely. So essentially, we've already heard from Georgia Ray, a huge problem. And I think one kind of element to that problem is when you are buying that new dress that you fancy wearing for that one evening, you've got a complete disconnect. Like, you're not realizing that decision to buy that product is actually causing environmental destruction. Many people working on that product who are not paid fairly or treated well. When you're buying that dress, companies have made us feel so kind of, okay with doing so because they're not really sharing the true story behind the product. So at Provenance, we're very passionate about enabling transparency, and enabling transparency that's not selective or greenwash, but transparency that's actually consistent and credible, and can really actually help drive real change. Like, I don't fundamentally believe that all of us buying clothes to wear want to destroy the planet or risk kind of endangering people. We're just not seeing that that's what we're doing when we make a purchase. So I guess our thesis at Provenance is let's sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let's throw light and see if we can uncover the supply chains behind our products and the impact that's really going on. And the reality is not all products are equal. Some products have been spending a long time trying to create materials that are more sustainable, are paying workers fairly, and it's just quite difficult to find that out at the moment, find out which end of the spectrum things are on. I'm a big fan of renting clothes and certainly a big fan of buying secondhand. But the reality is there's always going to be a market for buying new things. Well, certainly in socks and pants, that's for sure. And so we have to make sure that when we are buying new, we're buying from businesses that are, doing the right thing and being fully transparent about that in a credible way. So that's what we're doing at Provenance, working with brands.
I think that's really key in the sustainability spectrum of picking your wins at the moment and seeing where you can make better change and impact. And I don't think fashion can be sustainable without transparency at all. And I think later we'll lead into the different business models that are available now to use when it comes to you've decided to buy something new. What options do you have rather than you just had to go into a shop and buy it? I think there's so many different areas now that we can tap into for different occasions too. I think the next part along of that spectrum would be looking at fabric and textiles and the differences and developments in technology. We've seen LVMH at COP26 or a COP conference for the first time ever. Fashion is getting a serious voice at the table all of a sudden. But there's so many great technologies now emerging Dian-Jen, do you want to shed light on the work that you're doing and the why really, and why the why is important?
Yes, I can talk ages about that. So hi everyone, I'm Dian-Jen Lin, but you can call me DJ, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Post Carbon Lab. And in essence, we are a collaboration-based social enterprise, and we offer sustainable microbial coloration, textile finishing, R&D services to textile-based businesses, and especially in the micro SME spectrum, because for the moment, most sustainable innovations are only accessible to corporates or big businesses. If you have a big R&D budget, an R&D team, and a legal team, but we strive to offer more affordable, sustainable, and accessible information, as well as our services, our R&D, to enable changes from the bottom-up approach. So today I'm actually wearing a jumper that we have dyed with the leftover microbial colors derived from climate-positive microbes, aka algae and cyanobacteria, and we're striving to set up the circular coloration systems within our micro enterprise scope. And we believe that everyone has the power to really, whether you look at the material side, look at the color side, look at the consumption side, everybody has a role in engaging in this conversation, because we can see, I can see everybody's wearing clothes here now. And I would like to believe that everyone on the other side of the camera is also wearing some kind of clothes. And as long as we all wear clothes, we have a power in enabling those decisions and influencing the future we'd like to go. And that's kind of Post Carbon Lab in a nutshell. Thank you.
I think if we get to the point that we're also passionate about completely decarbonising or making fashion as most sustainable as possible, I don't think any of us would be wearing clothes. So I'm glad we're at the point we're at now at the first Decarbonisation Summit and not the 100th, where it might be a very different audience. That's really interesting to learn more about the fabric itself, because I think a lot of people are still looking at the polyester and the natural fabric and that conversation, but it's great to know that in a few years' time, there's going to be even wider technology available for us that we might just take for granted, like we do cotton and polyester at the moment, something as incredible and futuristic as Post Carbon Lab is. I think moving into like the framework side of things and understanding what goals we need to achieve, not just in fashion, but across the spectrum of sustainability. I think that's why I'm very passionate and happy that fashion has a seat at the table at this COP, because whilst I might not know anything on policy or automotive or energy, everybody that is in those worlds still wear clothes, still get dressed in the morning. And so it's a part of everybody's lifetime and a part of everyone's journey on sustainability. Coming to you, Geoff, I think if you could just shed light on the work that you're doing and the framework that you've built and some of the companies that you're working with currently.
Yeah, Scott, thanks. So, and I should just say, before anyone leaps to conclusions, you can only tell that those of us dialing in are wearing clothes from the chest up. So, let's not too many assumptions here. So my work at Future Fit, we started up in 2013 as a UK charity. And it was off the back of several years of frustration with working with global brands to help them understand how sustainable they were and help them to move towards sustainability. And it became clear when I was working as a consultant that there was no clear destination to aim for, that no one had defined what true sustainability means for a business. So I got together with my co-founder, who was equally frustrated looking at this from the investor side, working with pension funds and asset managers and others who were trying to understand the risk in their portfolios. And we realized that unless you have a destination, all you can tell is who is least bad among peers. You can't actually tell who's doing enough. So we quit the day jobs to start Future Fit Foundation and to take all the great system science. We've known for decades what needs to happen to live within planetary boundaries and to uphold social foundations, but to translate that into a clear set of goals for companies to aim for and a way to measure progress towards those goals. And we call that the Future Fit Business Benchmark, and it's a public good. Anyone can download it from our website and apply it within their businesses. We know that, and this is not specific to fashion, this is any business. Now, of course, some goals are harder to hit than others, depending on what kind of industry you're in. But the important thing, it gives this consistent line in the sand that we all need to reach to ensure we're not undermining the possibility of humans and other life flourishing on Earth forever. And then on the other side, to also positively contribute to the future we want, to actually take us closer toward a more environmentally restorative, socially just, and economically inclusive future. In terms of the companies we work with, there are quite a number of companies we work with that we're not allowed to talk about, even though they're using the benchmark. The simple reason is when companies start to measure how good they are against what science demands, rather than against industry best practice, many of them find that they're nowhere near where they need to be, right? So they're not yet ready to talk about that. But there are a number of global brands who are using FutureFit to guide their strategic goal setting and their day-to-day decisions in pursuit of those goals. And there are a number that are public in their use of the benchmark. So over the years, companies like Body Shop, Novo Nordisk, De Beers, and so forth have been vocal in their support for our work. But there are many more who aren't ready to tell the world yet.
I think that's a really interesting part. Since lockdown, everybody was shopping online and weren't really thinking about retail space and the role that retail space can play in the education part and the transparency part and communicating those messages. But even the accessibility that you said, you know, your benchmark is free for people to view and see and share. And there's a large conversation around the elitism and accessibility around sustainability. And so I think when we're all done with our clothes, it's really important that everybody has an option and a choice. And that's why I'm really grateful that we've got Dounia here, that obviously from Vestiaire Collective, that is a part of that latter phase of the sustainability of a garment, whether it's passing it on and selling it and sharing it. So Dounia, do you want to just shed some light on who Vestiaire are and the size and the growth? Because I think there's a lot of light on how big fast fashion has grown over the last 3, 4, 5 years, but there's also an emerging market for secondhand shopping and pre-loved fashion.
Yeah, completely. Thank you first for having me. Yes, if you take a step back, you will see that Vestiaire was born 12 years ago, but this crazy idea to fight waste in the fashion industry. And 12 years ago for the fashion industry at large, but also if we get a focus on the luxury segment, it was just an hopeless dream. And what we did at Vestiaire is really to find a way to smooth the experience for a consumer who wants to not throw the dress in a bin or in a charity bin, but to share it with the world. And what I like to say about the fast fashion is also the fact that today our goal is not just to be a platform, a marketplace platform who just do resell. Our difference here and why we want to be a leader on our sector is also because we want to move people away from fast fashion, coming to a more quality and durable item, if I can say. With the 3 million item into our catalog. And I think today we can say that we have consumer that wants that in their wardrobe. I think the pandemic really helped us also in that way, because people were seeing their wardrobe completely full and was, okay, so now I'm stuck in my house. What do I do with all of that? Okay, maybe I don't need that much. Maybe I don't need that t-shirt, €2 t-shirt that I will put in the washing machine and be completely useless in a 1 or 2 wash. And I think we have more and more consumer coming on the platform, but also more and more that are going to democratize this second-hand market.
Totally, and I think the changing business models within the fashion space, obviously Dian-Jen works on a collaboration-based business model at the moment, and I think there's going to be more of those as we branch into a more digital era of fashion too. On like the retail space and digital aspects, obviously none of us here have a big retail footprint in the UK, so maybe Georgia, you could speak a little bit on the role that retail space can play in like educating a consumer Obviously, we've seen people move out of the high street, but we've also seen people move into the high street and take an opportunity of, we've got this huge space now, what do we do with it? Is it an entertainment space or is it an education space? And perhaps how that can be vital in changing a broad consumer opinion on sustainable fashion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess what it comes down to is almost a communicative tool. So if I was a brand who had a store in High Street, I would be looking at the opportunities to use this space that I'm paying a lot for to not only house my clothing, but also as part of my marketing kind of toolkit. Like, this is an amazing space. You know, you can, here at COP, there's summits all around. You walk in and there's art displays and exhibitions and everything, and it's just this sensory overload, but also this amazing, powerful communication tool. And I do wonder, I wonder if this is happening not just in fashion, but across all kind of commercial buildings where it's housing something to sell and to buy, that they are going to be so much more than a shop, but almost like a marketplace. I could imagine you walk in, say, like to a rental shop. I know this is a big thing in New Zealand. The rental market is quite alive and kicking. So you would walk into, it's literally like a market. It's not individual, it's not one brand sharing their clothes, but individual brands all in one space. It's a completely different way as a consumer of kind of going through the process of buying. And I do think as a brand and as someone who does have retail space, if you want to be thinking about the future, which you should, if you're in business, you want to be thinking about next year beyond, you should be thinking about making it more than just a hanger with a few of your items, but more a chance to connect with your consumer, share what you're doing, expand the horizons, get a dialogue going with the consumers, be creative. It sounds exciting to me, like kind of makes me want to just own my shop and like have all my stuff and get that conversation going. So yeah, it's an exciting time, and they should be embracing it rather than shying away.
I think that's really important, that it's a collective approach as well. It's about everybody in the community seeing what part they can play in the role to be more sustainable or shop more sustainably or look after our clothes better. I think that part of the education in store is, right, you've bought this product, this is how you make it last as long as possible. Perhaps, Jessie, you could talk a little bit about the transparency aspect of clothing or the supply chain and what you feel brands should be communicating that they might not be at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess the way I see it moving forward is that we have to dematerialize fashion, right, to a certain degree. So renting and buying secondhand, but also I think there's lots of digital things we can do to still have the fun of fashion, but it not have to be like a material thing. But then the things you are buying at the end, we very much believe that, those products should be really high quality and have a fantastic story to tell. So we work with brands in order to help them be transparent on their supply chain, because that's pretty much where 90% of the impact is usually occurring. People always kind of forget that, I think, sometimes when they're talking about carbon, and it's a bit of a wild west right now for brands talking about their carbon footprints, often celebrating successes in carbon in their HQ or their kind of owned buildings. But actually, the lion's share exists in their supply chain. And that's very much what we aim to help brands to be transparent on. So the first thing we try to do is to help them open up on suppliers, and on the ingredients or materials that have gone into making a particular product. And we do that on a product level. We very much see a decision to buy something is on the product in front of you, not just about the brand in general. But then essentially what we do is we help businesses to open up kind of like the key proof points about those materials and suppliers. So that covers kind of a range of different things, including the impact on climate, nature, waste, workers, and communities. And we embrace kind of existing certifications where they are, respected and trustworthy. And the key thing we're doing is bringing those to life. And it's fascinating. Like, so many people we see who scan kind of QR codes that we're enabling on labels or interact with our tools inside e-commerce sites, like, hadn't even really thought about like the fact that this pair of jeans or this t-shirt had really been on a trip around the world, like before it's bought by you. I think all the different steps in kind of the creation of something simple like a t-shirt. I think a lot of what we're doing is not just about informing about the impact of the product. It's also about just educating and enlightening people to just quite how much effort and how many people have been involved in creating something that seems simple, I think, when you buy it. But yeah, that's a lot of the stuff we're making transparent. We also try and weave in imagery, good old factory videos, wherever there are some, because the reality is we have to inspire people and capture their imagination for sustainability and green to become cool.
I think that's really important, actually, that the disconnect between garment workers and a garment that's on a high street somewhere is something that's not talked about enough. I know Fashion Revolution do some really cool campaigns that highlight where these people are and that they are real people. It's not just an item that's turned up at your doorstep that you ordered 20 hours ago. Georgia, do you want to talk on that?
I'm so interested in what you do, Jessie, and I have definitely looked at your website and done a bit of work, but I'd just be interested, so as a consumer, how do I interact with your platform? What's the actual mechanism there?
Yeah, so essentially it's B2B to C. So the platform is used by brands, and the brands share the information through their own channels. So the main channels that you'll see provenance information existing is inside brands' own websites, off of swing tags or labels from QR codes. But we also exist quite a lot in social under the Learn More. So essentially what we are is kind of like templates and formats that brands can use to be more transparent. So rather than kind of building all of that themselves, they can use the Provenance tools straight away. But because it's powered by Provenance, it also comes with that consistency and kind of credibility as well. So it's, adds a kind of another layer of trust to the information brands would be sharing. But yeah, you have to go into a brand's own website. So we plug into platforms like Shopify or Salesforce Commerce Cloud, like all of those different platforms that brands use.
Yeah, that's so cool, because I know one of the challenges we have when we work with our clients around transparency is the fact that if they want to be transparent and like share all the data with their customers, they've got a 200 to 500 page report, which is like a PDF on their website, which is completely not digestible to a consumer or a citizen. And it's cool that I think there are all these innovations like Provenance and other ones trying to create that, as we were kind of talking, like this open dialogue. Because as a consumer, if you go in, I think there's growing awareness in the fact that we do actually want to know what is in our clothes and who made them and where has it come from.
Right.
I think that's just becoming, fashion, as you say, is only just becoming into like the kind of climate crisis rhetoric. This is the first time fashion's been at COP, even though it's number 26. And so it's definitely coming in a kind of, there's a real awareness growing in it. And I think what will come out of that is consumers really wanting to understand, like what is this? What am I wearing? Just the same as people ask about their food, like where did my food come from? That inquisitive mind is starting to become, just part of being a citizen now. So it's just so cool that there's so many platforms. And we try, obviously, EcoAge to do our bit, but it's cool that we're having these kind of conversations.
I think a key word. Yes, go ahead, Dounia, please do. Yeah.
And if I might jump into that topic, and I join you on the fact that innovation is super great and really the future. I can share with you what we try to achieve with His Royal Highness the Prince Charles, and actually we committed with different brands on this digital ID. Going further on the transparency, I think for the consumer, it's also the last blocker is the time spent on the platform to get to resell, and thinking that with this information as a consumer, you will be able to sell your t-shirt in 20 seconds on a resale platform can be, I think, a super great achievement for the whole industry and the consumer first.
I think a key word that Jessie picked up on there is trust. We've got fast fashion brands creating a 400-page report, and they'll pick one line that says they do something amazingly well, and they bury it in a report. And then once you get further down that report, you actually think, oh, so it was the label on the clothes that was made from recycled materials and not the garment itself.
Or the trees they planted.
Yeah, exactly. They're planting trees somewhere. It's the same tree. We've got 100 million of them somewhere now. But I think the trust element also ties into COP and the government and their role that they can play here. The fashion has had probably 4 lines on the United Environment Programme website for a while saying that it's the second most polluting industry worldwide, which I've tried to find where that derived from, and I can't quite find who said that first. But if it's on the UN website, someone thinks it's very important, and yet here we are at COP26, and it's just getting a voice. I think, Geoff, I wanted to move into like the role that governments can play in terms of like frameworks and legislation and perhaps policy that needs to be implemented, and where you see the value is in that, and how something like that might come about.
Yeah, I mean, the role of government is massive, but massively complex. I mean, the fact that we're at COP26 and people are still trying to figure out what is it we need to commit to as national governments, not how do we get this shit done, but what do we need to commit to? Who's going to do what? I mean, that's appalling, frankly, to be at COP26 and still be in that position. So I think that the potential for governments to set the right rules of the game so that brands really can move in the right direction is huge. My confidence that they will is tiny. So I think we really do rely on the companies to understand, even if only from enlightened self-interest, that this is what we need to do differently. Governments will follow, right? Governments will pick up. You've only got to look at what's happened in the automotive sector. You know, a lot of the world's governments now, certainly in Europe.
I think the government have caught on to what you're saying, Geoff, and have messed with your connection slightly.
By 2040. Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's about it, yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so in the automotive sector, many countries now are starting to ban.
I think we've slightly lost you again there, but I think the point that you're coming on to is the legislation around highly emitting vehicles and ICE vehicles and the transition to electric vehicles, and how policy has accelerated that greatly. And so there's targets in place for 2030. But it's also been incentivised by the government. There's charging infrastructure incentives and government grants available. I suppose, Dian-Jen, do you want to talk about more that what you would like to see in this space?
Oh,
we properly lost them.
Oh. Lost all my friends. Come
Recording
back.
in progress.
We'll just wait for them to come back.
Hi.
Hi guys, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry, DJ, do you want to just speak on the things that you would like to see in the space, and maybe more, I suppose it'd be more of what you guys are doing and you guys are working on that are really going to drive change in the area as well when it comes to technological developments, and how that might spur people on to really make change?
I think I'd like to talk a little bit about our starting point. It lets you see how this kind of all goes around this. The reason that we started doing Post-Carbon Lab is that we realized that a lot of the companies and a lot of the industry, fashion industry at least, we're all aiming to hit that carbon neutral point. And then, you know, I saw a pledge at COP26 that the fashion industry for sourcing, we're planning to be reduce carbon emissions by 43% by 2049. But I'm just a little bit concerned about whether we're doing enough in that space. Because if you think about what happened through the pandemic, where, you know, we were all in lockdown and we had 17% drop of the carbon emissions. However, that had like a negligible impact on our climate in terms of climate cooling, if you're thinking it in that way. We didn't actually manage to sort of allow that drop to be reflected into temperature. And in some studies, because of the meticulous way the climate works, it actually the global temperature actually rise because the smog is less, and then the sky has cleared up and the sun is able to radiate through, and the global temperature is actually rising. I mean, the climate is working in a meticulously engineered way that we cannot necessarily decipher and pinpoint, oh, this is because of fashion, this is because of that. But what I'm saying is that if we're aiming to be carbon neutral in, say 2050, what temperature baseline are we sitting on there? You know, it could be already the 2 degrees Celsius temperature raise, and we're like, oh, we're finally carbon neutral, but we're already, the carbon emission line is like this, dropped with COVID, and then going all the way up, and then here maybe we're like, okay, finally carbon neutral. I'm thinking ahead. I think there's a lot more things that we can do, and that's why Post-Carbon Lab started. We are post-carbon in a way that we want to be post-carbon emissions, and want to experiment, you know, in the social, cultural, economic, technological, biological sense, to experiment and R&D what we can do to accommodate that kind of post-carbon heavy, carbon-based economy, to see what that looks like. And one example I can make is that, for instance, we are a service-based, collaboration-based social enterprise. The reason being that a lot of people come to us, business professionals, investors, come to us and be like, oh, why don't you start selling, say, photosynthetic t-shirts or, microbially colored clothes and be the, next big sustainable fashion brand. And we're like, what's the point? We have so much textile waste in the landfill. And it just misses the point. Our means doesn't justify the ends. And our aim and our goal is to help businesses, textile-based businesses that have to sell products and items to be able to survive in the meantime, to make that necessary transition so we can head towards a post-carbon-based economy. And that's why we're here and doing what we do.
I think it's a really interesting point when you talk about it kind of ties into overconsumption and overproduction. And when I see global fashion brands do a sustainability line, it's an addition to stuff that they're already doing. We do all of this product range and we've added another one on that is our green line or whatever it might be. So I think when it comes to overproduction or overconsumption, if we're going to make something, it has to be post-carbon or in your sense, like something that is taking out, not just neutralizing bad stuff that we've done previously. Georgia, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just, it's fascinating, all the carbon conversation, and it got me thinking, like, why has fashion as an industry never really been linked to the climate crisis? And I feel like it's because it's not really obvious. Like, if you put on a jumper that's soft and it's nice and cozy, but it's made of polyester and it's plastic, there's not that connection there. Whereas if you use like a plastic bag, or if you put your petrol in your car, like you can smell the petrol, like you smell like how bad it is for the environment, and then like your car, and you have to fill it up again. It's very like in your face that potentially what you're doing, especially in terms of the, everything around climate and carbon and what you need to do as a consumer. You're told to use your keep cup, you're told to have your cotton bag, reduce your plastic, which is your plastic bags, but there hasn't been the dialogue, which is like, but also your clothes are made of plastic. It was kind of like we were talking before around how, when you put clothes on, it's nice and warm, and you put a hat on, and it's nice and cozy, and then you look at the label, and it's 100% acrylic. And if you think about acrylic, it's like a hard, it's the things that I think you were saying, like on a board game, the thing that moves around the board, that can be made of acrylic, and yet there's also this fluffy hat is made of acrylic, and it's just not that connection. And then on top of that, the industry has beautiful people looking amazing in scenery, wearing the clothes. So there's never that connection to any of the impacts that actually the industry is creating. And I do wonder if that's the reason, apart from all the greenwash, which is obviously the biggest reason, that it's taken so long for fashion and retail and the impacts to be at the table and people actually having the conversations about the impacts and why we need to change.
I think connection is probably the strongest word we can use here, because one of my main gripes when we talk about diversity and inclusivity in fashion and exploitation, it's usually the exploitation of garment workers who are 80% female, women of colour and black women, and yet at the other end of the marketing spectrum, we're celebrating these people in this community. So there's a complete disconnect of, look at us, we're doing great stuff because we're inclusive on our marketing campaigns, whilst we're not paying garment workers a living wage. And it's something that Fashion Revolution, EcoAge, and these great charities and companies work really hard to communicate those for people that don't have the voice.
Yeah.
We've got some really great questions coming in online, so please keep those coming in. It'd be great if I could switch to some of those that will be open for everybody to, I'll try and tailor it to the right person, but if you want to jump in, please just go for it as well. So how can sustainable fashion brands entering the market compete with sheer spending power of the less ethical powerhouses like fast fashion brands that I won't name, but you will know who they are, and the access to consumers that buy those? How do we make them switch? Anybody want to have a crack at it?
If a new designer came, oh, sorry, no, I've been talking a lot. You go. I've been waffling on.
We at Vestiaire, we believe that we need to take also the responsibility and join our effort with the different brands. So I guess how we make the switch is start educating the brands and also sharing our expertise with them, which with what we called resell as a service for us, but it's more the partnership we create for them to understand the circularity, because if you take the old linear business model, they're not into this circularity. This is so brand new for them. They don't know how to give value to their own item after they go out of the shops. So we have now this expertise. We know how valuable is a purse or whatever clothes we have on the platform, but they need to learn and to understand. So we create those partnerships. We had 3 pilots with different brands. I have in mind Mulberry and Alexander McQueen, for instance. And we saw, like, as soon as they're proposing this offer to their consumer, we had such an excitement from their consumer base. And we saw also that they, after doing it once, they're doing it twice or coming back on our platform. More than 50% of the people who listed an item came back and listed another one, but directly from their home or buying a secondhand. So it's how we create this education / partnership to exchange our best practice, but also to get them into the circularity. I think it's one of the levers.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 things I'm guessing this is probably this question's from a fashion designer who's, wanting to make great, show their creativity through product and create impact. I'd say, what are your values as a designer? Like, what are you actually, no, more than a designer, as a person, like, what are you trying to put out into the world? Are you trying to create good? Well, then there are simple steps you can take. Like, don't use synthetics, because that's fossil fuels. Think ahead. Like, fossil fuels people talk about it, like, they might not be around. They're finite. So think ahead. Collaborate with Post Carbon Lab if there's opportunities or other innovations. But yeah, use natural. And then also something that might, help this is, I think fast fashion is dead. I think its time has come.
Not cool anymore.
It's not cool. And legislation is going to come up, especially around living wage. Like, these fast fashion brands, we're not naming names, but we all know, their whole business model is based upon exploitation and slave labor. Modern slave labour. Slave labour. Slave labour.
I think that's really, as far as I go down the sustainability rabbit hole when it comes to fashion, you get to 2 things, and it's either exploitation of people or exploitation of water or misuse of water, whether it's dyeing or like waste. There's so many villages that have been engulfed by fast fashion and unsustainable fashion. If you look at the Chitron River, Kantamanto markets in Ghana, there's so many of these villages that have just been overwhelmed by our waste here. And yet that disconnect is just not something that's communicated very well. I think we've got another question, which I think, Jessie, you might be able to touch on a bit more with the work that you do. And it's, should fashion brands take greater responsibility for the way their products are delivered, made, used, sold, and that sort of whole spectrum of the responsibility brands have?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I very much think so. I think there's a really important part of the entire supply chain and life cycle of a product, which is about the brand selling the product to the person that will ultimately own it and hopefully wear it and love it many times. And I really think that's the crux of the whole system, even though there are thousands of interactions and people that exist on both sides, whether that's waste management or in the making of the garment. But yeah, I think that very special relationship in the transaction of selling the garment is really important. And I really believe the brand, should absolutely take responsibility for everything that's led to that moment. I also think on the other side, as the person buying the product, I think you have the right to know how that product's been created and the impact that it's had on people and planet, and that should be transparent by law, like it is in many of the food industry. Like, you can't buy fish today in Europe unless it comes with full records of traceability all the way down to the vessel where it was caught, and that's the law. I really believe that should be the case for a pair of jeans as well. But yeah, I do think it's the brand's responsibility as the end of the food chain and hold a lot of power. However, I think there's also an opportunity for brands to rethink how their supply chains function and give ownership of the brand and the final thing to more of their supply chain. Like, I'm really pro businesses that have models where workers in their supply chain also own a piece of the company, which again we've seen quite a lot in food, but I think is pretty novel in fashion. Haven't come across it very much. But why not? Why shouldn't the workers in the supply chain own a piece of the pie? That does require having a supply chain that's slightly less bait and switch and price driven. But yeah, I think it could be a very powerful feature for the fashion industry that's a bit more inclusive.
Scott, could I come in there?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's absolutely spot on, and I think there's very little excuse for a brand that doesn't take ownership of these supply chain impacts now. A report recently came out from Planet Tracker where they did a lot of deep analysis into wet processing, which is one of the most impactful areas of fashion supply chains. And they looked at 67 wet processing facilities around the world and figured out that for an average one-off investment of $450,000, they would be able to save those wet processing plants $370,000 a year in energy, water, and waste avoided costs, right? And that would have more than 10% improvement on their energy, water, and greenhouse gases. Now that's phenomenal, right? And it's incredibly easy. And it's usually just a lack of know-how, because a lot of these wet processors are in parts of the world where they don't have access to quite so much detailed information, and they're being put under price pressure. And then there's just financing, but it's a no-brainer to reduce those impacts. That said, even if every wet processor in the world implemented those really simple changes, then the growth expected in the fast fashion industry is going to cancel those out by 2029, right? So we've got to realize that the main problem with fast fashion is that what that industry really manufactures is desire, right? It's desire to get something new every month. That's what's got to change. And that's why I think these resale programs and so forth, and the use of new materials, hopefully can threaten their entire business model. So they either wake up or they fall by the wayside.
Totally. I think there's a really nice tie in there with the dissociation of price and cost. And coming back to the question earlier about, you know, how do we market and how do we get those consumers to switch? It's separating how much a value is paid, how much you pay for something, an item, in terms of monetary value, and the cost it has on the planet and the environment. Yes, you might buy 4 £10 t-shirts a year, but if you spend £40 on one of those that has much lesser impact on the planet and the environment, then it has inherently more value. I hope we've got time for one more question, which I think, DJ, you might be more up your street. Will plant-based garments eventually compete with agri-food if demands rise? So like integrating bamboo and hemp and those sorts of materials into clothing, and how do we get that to a consumer again, I suppose?
I think this is where we have to work together with Jessie. Bamboo actually notoriously have had this reputation in the sustainable fashion sourcing world that it could have been coupled with food crop competition as well as deforestation as well, and especially when these practices are taking place in developing countries. So it's very important. I know it's difficult, which is why Jessie should come in. It's very important for us to be able to understand and identify where these fibers are exactly from, how are they cultured. And at the moment, it's very difficult because we're using a globalized it's based on exploiting developing countries and their natural resources, water, to be able to cultivate these fibers as well as materials. So for instance, it's the same for us, but I only speak for the coloration aspect. I wanted to say that more than 99% of the colorants within our industry are derived from petrochemicals. And I know that Georgia, they were saying, you know, we're wearing acrylic, we're wearing polyester, these are plastic, but actually not just that. The colors that are in your clothes, it could be a naturally, it could be organic cotton, but it's still dyed with petrochemical. And what's scary is that using that petrochemical-based colorant, what can happen in the natural environment when it's been disposed in landfill? these synthetic colorants actually hinders the biodegradation of natural fibers. And that's where it then correlates to another ripple effect of natural disasters, climate change, as we are speaking right now. And as to how can we make sure, so the question was how plant-based fiber won't compete with food crop. I think, you know, as long as these things are taking place very, very far away in developing countries, you know, maybe there's language barrier, maybe there's a control management framework issue. As long as that exists, it's difficult. So what we can do in, you know, now that UK is Brexited, what we can do is actually look inside, starting more a different kind of production systems that are decentralized, that are local. For instance, the concept of fiber shed, where all the things are produced within the same radius. You can go and see how things are grown. For instance, we grow microorganisms vertically in a converted garage in East London. So these are things that we can see, and then we can immediately identify. We can communicate. We can see what kind of chemicals you're using. Is there any petrochemical involved in the process? These are things that we can immediately face and identify, versus in a globalized, you know, unable to track, opaque, especially. I'm actually really intrigued by what Jessie was saying, like down to the ingredient level in the production, manufacturing process, because we face so many troubles when it comes to asking textile manufacturers, oh, what process have you been using in your ingredients? Because then it's sent to us, in your textiles, when it's sent to us, our microorganisms don't like it. It's too toxic. We can't grow it. So it's an information imbalance. Yeah. And for that, we really need everybody involved. Yeah.
Totally. I think the information part is really vital as well. I see campaign after campaign, you know, we've got this sustainability line, we've got this sustainability campaign. Without doing the audits on themselves, the companies don't know where they're most wasteful, or what part of their business they're emitting the most pollution or chemicals or whatever it might be. So I think the auditing process is really vital in understanding where their wins might be along that sustainability spectrum, and understanding what they're doing wrong before they've committed to going for this target, or, you know, planting millions of trees somewhere that are irrelevant. So I think that's a really key part of that. Did you want to speak a little bit more on like the EcoAge and the holistic approach that you guys have when it comes to that sort of strategy as well?
Yeah. I was just thinking about the auditing as far as in like deep thought staring at you. What's interesting though is like fast fashion brands in their big reports, they're saying that they've got code of conducts and they're saying that they do auditing, but they're not auditing the right things. You know, we work with the full spectrum from textile manufacturing all the way into smaller brands. And one of the big issues is the fact, that the audit can go in and tick, 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 okay, this is okay in the factory, but actually it's completely unacceptable. And so there's two kind of ways in that. Like, what are the companies measuring? What are they monitoring them against? What lobbying are they doing to keep those kind of reports and audits in a place that pleases and suits them? And then what are they actually trying to achieve? And it kind of goes back to this business model of fast fashion. It's unsustainable. It cannot exist in a regenerative circuit. It doesn't matter if a fast fashion brand or a fashion brand is got a recycled polyester line. That's not, which is often how they say they're achieving their sustainability ambitions, or we've got a recycled polyester line that's made of PET bottles. I'm sure everyone's seen that on the labels. That's not achieving a circular economy. And this is quite interesting if we have time. So basically the PET bottles, if they are in a PET bottle recycling system, can be recycled and recycled over again. So more bottles make more bottles, make more bottles. As soon as you take those bottles, and fast fashion brands kind of portray as though they go out to the ocean and like sweep in the bottles. Like, don't worry, we're getting it before it goes into the ocean. And then they put it into their leggings that they're trying to create. And so their leggings are made of 67% recycled polyester mixed in with other things. That bottle, which has been turned into the leggings, cannot be like recycled into anything else. It's not a circular system. So we've taken something that could have been circular.
I would say, and it sheds microplastic during usage.
Exactly, that's the thing. So we need to be, lots of brands are using these circular, if there are fashion designers, aspiring ones watching, and you're wanting to engage with circularity and a lot of these buzzwords, but which actually are fantastic, do it in a really smart way. Because don't think that taking a plastic bottle and turning it into your leggings is going to help you achieve your sustainability. Don't be a fast fashion brand. And as a consumer, don't buy and think you're being better by buying a recycled polyester top, because you're not. Instead, fight against fast fashion, buy secondhand, or look for natural fibers.
Yeah, I think that's really important, the education around plastic and polyester. There was a survey a couple of years ago that said over 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds don't know that polyester is plastic. So by just seeing the word polyester, they just think it's a fabric and it's grown or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's so true. And not only are you ending the life cycle of a plastic bottle, you're also driving up the price for plastic bottles by putting it into a fashion industry, weaving it into a garment that can't be unwound and made into another fabric. You've just ended the life cycle of that plastic completely. And you glamorize this marketing of we use recycled polyester.
Yeah, it's the sea of greenwash that as consumers we're wading through. And so that's why it has to be a systemic approach. If we go back to, do brands need to take responsibility? They have to. They must. It's unacceptable if you don't. I'd love to sit here and have someone from a fast fashion brand to be like, you're done.
We tried. We did try. I think we've got a few minutes left, so it'd be good to have some little words of wisdom that people can take home, whether it's to do with accountability or how people shop, or something that almost everybody can do that changes habit and makes a positive impact. Do you want to start, Dounia? Maybe assuming this is going to be a pre-loved sustainable element here.
Of course, before, and we all know that, but producing is always impacting. So I would say that we need to choose pre-love first. And we also, and among pre-love sector, we now find a difference between the different brands that wants to get into this consumerism really fast. And I think we need to choose the brands, even if it's a second-hand brands, that we need to be more aware of what we are buying and who is making the clothes, but also who are the brands behind this offer. So I would say pre-loved, always the first choice.
Nice. And that's everything from luxury fashion to thrift shopping to charity shops. We don't need new stuff all the time. Georgia Ray, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I think if I had to say kind of one piece of advice that you could take away, it's clothes are such an important part of your identity as a person. They've always been linked to massive political movements from the 50s to the 70s. Clothes are so vital in society, not only, for the practical reasons, but they're who you are. And wouldn't you want that to be loved? I know this jacket, it's woven in Scotland. I found it in a thrift shop, which is really cool. It's going to remind me every time I put it on of this fantastic panel. It reminds me of that time that stranger was like, hey, cool blazer, which was just really nice. And so this clothing, which I hope to have for a long time, is part of my identity, and I love wearing it. And I think if you can start to embed that into, make fashion part of your identity, love it. And then in a more hard-hitting note, how comfortable are you as a consumer wearing the blood and tears of someone within the supply chain who is paid completely below a living wage, below a minimum wage? How comfortable are you wearing the blood, sweat, and tears of someone else?
Hard hitting. I like it. Geoff, we've just got a minute to go, so hopefully we can get round everybody.
Just buy stuff that's going to last and that you're going to want to wear in a year's time.
Awesome. Buy less, buy better. Jessie?
Ask the brands who made my clothes. Ask for more transparency.
Cool. DJ?
I want to say what you already have, what's in your wardrobe is the most sustainable thing you can have. And if you have to buy from people like Dounia. And also probably don't start another sustainable fashion brand trying to sell and promote more consumption and production.
Totally. I'm with everyone and what everyone has said. My advice would be follow these amazing panelists and for everyone online. I'm sure there's a post out on social media, so do tag them, follow up with their companies and follow up with them, ask them questions, hold brands accountable. Thank you everyone that's joined us, and thank you everyone at home that's tuned in. We have a final panel of the day that will be starting in about 45 minutes to an hour. And I'll be back tomorrow to host another panel on gender, diversity and decarbonisation. So I shall see you then.